online advertising, and we'll have a contemporary view. So a lot of the things that I think are relevant at the moment in online advertising industry and how it's being done, I will sort of go through. So you might have some ideas of online advertising or advertising in general, that it's about creativity and creating interesting concepts that sort of capture the attention of consumers. So that's basically the basic concept of advertising. And of course, we want to have concepts and content that speaks to people, and I'll talk about that later. But what has been going on in the online advertising industry for basically for 2 decades. So Google AdWords started in around 2003, I think, so about 20 years ago. And the industry has basically moved all the time into more technical, so to speak. So we work a lot with numbers, and we click buttons, we choose settings, we make selections, we configure things. So that's very different from advertising as it used to be long ago, maybe, where we did it differently. Maybe in offline advertising and traditional mass media advertising might match with the image that you have in your minds. If you think about TV shows like Mad Men, or those where they are in their suits working in an office and doing some planning meetings and then meeting the client and presenting some pitch and so on. So I've never had such a meeting in my life, but I've done a lot of online advertising. So usually we sit at home and, well, we have Zoom meetings, of course, with clients and so on, but it's very different. We talk about numbers and plans and things like that. So here's a screenshot from Google Ads. So this is what it looks like when you log in and start running campaigns. So you'd be looking at different metrics and different campaigns, and yeah, it's quite technologically focused nowadays, as you can see from this. So the other platforms, so Google Ads is the dominant online advertising platform to date, and it used to be called AdWords. So Google AdWords, it sort of was built around the idea of search ads. So as we discussed last week, we have the sponsored section and then the organic section in the search engine result pages. So search ads were the sponsored section and still are, and those were the big innovation that brought Google to be among the top companies in the world. But since then, the Google Ads has expanded, so they have search partners, other search engines and websites that are included in there. Then they also have GDN, so Google Display Network, where you can run display advertising. Google also has YouTube, where you can run video advertising, and it also has Google Discovery. So this is something that's in Android phones. It's basically this kind of news feed that Android has. So Discovery is also a channel to run ads in the Google network or platform, and also Google Maps. So those type of real estate make the Google Ads the #1 online advertising platform. So if you have to learn and pick one online ads platform, then it will most likely be Google Ads. And often especially in e-commerce, we have Google ads, and then we have Meta ads. It used to be called Facebook ads. So in Meta ads, you can access Meta's platforms, Facebook and Instagram, and you can run ads on those platforms. But basically, there are other platforms than TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, and they all work in pretty much the same way. So if you have learned how to use Google Ads, then you most likely know how to use, or it will be easy for you to learn these other platforms. And yeah, the idea is usually that, or most often is pay-per performance. So you sort of pay for clicks, and there's an ad auction taking place with quality adjustment. So what this means is that pay-per-performance is sort of translated into you selecting the goal of the campaign nowadays. You can select goals like visibility, traffic, or conversions, usually sales, but it can be any type of other conversions as well. And then the platform tries to optimize for that goal. So it tries to find people to target that are, according to its logic, most likely to behave in a way that's consistent with your objective. And ad auction means that you are competing against other advertisers. So for the same audience's attention, multiple advertisers, of course, can bid for. So this bidding is another central activity in online ad platforms. So you can set manual bids that we used to do. So how much you want to pay per click, for example, or how much you want to pay per conversion. Nowadays, it's this bidding pricing of the bids are sort of, it's done more and more automatically. So it's less and less manually done by advertisers. But you can still do it, for example, in Google Ads. And sometimes there are campaigns, like for example, brand campaigns that you want to maintain manual bidding in, because if you don't, then the click prices will generally inflate, which is interesting. This has multiple times happened when I've changed from manual bidding to automatic bidding in a brand campaign. Brand campaign means that we are bidding for brand keywords. So usually those clicks are very cheap because our relevance is very high for those. So even if other competitors are bidding, their relevance or quality score will be lower and their cost will be higher. But that being said, most campaigns nowadays run actually on this, what is known as smart bidding, which is automatic form of bidding. So advertiser would generally choose the goal. And we'll talk about this a bit more as well today, but automation is sort of default way of doing things in ad platforms nowadays. And over the years, in the past 10 years, it has changed a lot. So all the time, almost on a yearly basis, something is sort of taken away from people optimizing the accounts. And this has good and bad sides, of course. On the one hand, it's sort of limiting human decision making and human like autonomy or agency in running campaigns and doing optimization. On the other hand, it's freeing us to, at least in theory, do more bigger decisions on strategy, and it's also enabling one person to handle multiple accounts. So for example, I know an organization where there's one person in charge of 4 countries, Google Ads campaigns, and well, one person could do even probably more than that because of the high degree of automated decision making in campaign management. So it means that one person can now manage a lot more accounts than in the past. And then the third component here is quality adjustment. So I briefly touched upon it, but it means that if your sort of quality score is a term from Google Ads, and relevance score is a concept from Meta Ads. These factors sort of functions and the emphasis of how much they affect might have changed from how big factors they were initially, but the concept and the idea, I think, is still valid in all the platforms. It just means that if something is more relevant for the user, you are paying less for the click. So basically, the idea is that if you're running very poor ads that are have bad copy, they are not interesting, people are not clicking them, or then they are badly targeted. They're targeting group that's not interested in your offering, then you will pay higher price for every click that you get relative to an advertiser that's running good ads that are getting higher CTR, so click-through rate. And so that's one component of how this quality score is calculated, how frequently people click on your ads. But there are other factors there as well, such as landing page experience. So what happens after the click also matters, because basically you could promise a lot of things in your ads, like free beer. Think of free beer, you get high click-through rate, but then people notice on the website that there's no free beer. It's a clickbait. So that's why the factor considers also what happens after the click in this quality adjustment. So you cannot sort of clickbait your way into low click prices. So click prices matter, of course, because then everything is sort of downstream. All the metrics are calculated from clicks. So if it costs you more to get one visitor, in general, there's a rule of thumb that conversion rate in e-commerce tends to be around 1%, 1 to 2%, something like that. So it means that you have to have 100 clicks or visitors on your website to have one sale, right? So therefore you need to have a lot of clicks, and therefore the unit price matters. So if your click price is 20 cents versus 40 cents, assuming the same conversion values, you're paying double. Your customer acquisition cost will be double in the latter case. And this applies to basically the idea of CPM as well, so cost per mille, cost per 1,000 impressions. And even though you would be bidding on clicks or conversions, actually what happens in the background is that the system still translates your bid into sort of CPM bid, because beforehand we don't know if a person will click or buy. So you are sort of seeing average click price or average cost per click and average CPA or cost per acquisition, and those are averaged over many events taking place. So then here's a sort of like controversial statement, or which seems a little bit maybe different from what we discussed last week about keywords and your task also, the weekly task about keyword research. So the idea is that actually keywords matter a lot less in online advertising as they did before. So in search engine optimization, keyword research is very important because we need to identify keywords that we want to optimize for using organic SEO, so search engine optimization on the page and off the page and all that we discussed last week. But in online advertising, the targeting has shifted drastically away from keywords, and platforms like Google are considering a lot more factors. Keyword is just one. So what they are trying to figure out basically to use all their information about you to in the decision of whether or what type of ads to show you basically. So they analyze the indenture from keyword, but they analyze the websites you go into. They try to understand the topics you're interested in, and especially they want to categorize you into this in-market audience. So for example, I was searching actually earlier or in the previous last week. So I was searching for cars and visiting some car websites, and now I see car ads all the time. So Google figured out that I'm in market for buying a new car. So it's showing me these ads on uh, different websites that are part of Google's network. So we discussed this Google Display Network. So I go to Ilta-Sanomat or whatever, I'm seeing different cars appearing there. And that's because Google has categorized me into this in-market for cars. And it's happening, the targeting and the ad display is happening in multiple channels. As I mentioned, the example, I'm doing something in Google search, but then Google is using that information to target display banners to me, but also it might be using that information to catch me in YouTube. So this is the benefit of some of these platforms that have multiple individual channels in them, so they can do this multi-channel targeting, and that's the direction. And those are the it's we are less concerned now as marketers about choosing individual keywords to target, but we are sort of relying on this machine learning more now that Google knows our goal. So our goal is conversions, and then its job is to find the audience, find the individual people that are consistent with that goal. So keywords are one factor for that, but there might be other factors as well. So this is a little bit misleading in the sense that we still are running keyword campaigns in Google Ads. So we do have those, and we have campaigns that are targeting important keywords, brand keywords, and also keywords that talk about the products and services in our industry, basically that match our offering. So yes, they still exist, but what I'm saying is that the emphasis of such campaigns has drastically decreased. So before it was sort of you get 100% of your sales from keyword-based campaigns where you select the keywords, but nowadays it might be that you only get 1/3 or even less, and 2/3 of the campaigns are automated. So they have these campaigns called PMax, Performance Max, DSA, dynamic search ads. Then you have shopping campaigns with the shopping feed, and well, generally the feed-based marketing is just has taken over sort of the manual selection of products. Instead of manually selecting what products we sort of want to emphasize, we dump the whole feed of thousands of products to Google or Facebook, and the platform itself is trying to find the right product for the right person. So these type of campaigns are now the dominant form of online advertising. They have a very high degree of automation. They have most of their logic is based on machine learning algorithms, and the role of the advertiser is sort of marginalized. So besides setting the goal and budget, you are doing pretty much nothing else. And third thing is the ad creatives. So the thing with ad creatives is very interesting because nowadays the paradigm is shifting or has shifted already into us providing snippets. So instead of writing one ad, we are writing 10 headlines and then 10 long headlines and then 5 descriptions. So we write them like sort of in a list. And then what Google does is it combines them in whatever way it wants to create an ad, which is an optimal combination of these elements that we provide, right? So it's very different from, again, the traditional view of viewing advertising, where we are in total control of the message. We know what is the headline, we know what is the message or the description, and nothing else can vary. You can't do that anymore. They are forcing you to put multiple headlines and multiple descriptions, and they will decide how they will mix them. So we have already sort of lost the control of the advertising. And it's not only text, it's also the images. So we can upload images, and then Google decides which image it will use with which text and how it will combine them. So there's also automation involved. Google may automatically take images from your website if you want. And nowadays, of course, with generative AI, there are already functions or features that you can enable where it might generate text to your ad automatically or generate a picture automatically and use it. So these are not yet mainstream, meaning that not a big portion of advertisers don't use such features yet, but they are now being tested and integrated into the ad platforms. So, and I will talk later about it because in fact, such ads often match the average performance of an advertiser. So they can match human quality copywriting. I'll talk more about that later. So it used to be really strongly manual, that we select keywords or other targeting criteria that we wanted. In Facebook's case, we select demographics and so on and so on. Then we write ads, we set bids, we set budgets. So we do a lot of manual decisions, and then we run and optimize the campaigns. But now indeed Google can select the keywords, and even they want us to set a broad match. When we select some keywords, broad match, there are different match types that matter. So the stricter your match type is, the less variants Google will target. So if you are using exact match, then the search needs to be exactly that term and nothing else for your ad to bid on being shown. But Google is pushing really this broad, that you just give some signals to Google that these are generic keywords, and then basically it will figure out how related those keywords are to different searches that don't mention that keyword. So this is another drive that really Google is pushing for, the broad matching versus exact or phrase matches, which give more control to the advertiser where the ads are shown. And yeah, as I mentioned, Gen AI and the bidding is automated. Like most campaign managers nowadays use automated bidding, in very few cases you use manual bidding, and yeah, that's just the default behavior now. So nobody's doing bidding anymore. We just set this return on ad spend target, for example, 500%, which means that for every euro you spend on ads, you get 5 euros in return. That's sort of an easy way to understand this ROAS. It's sort of a variation of ROI, or return on investment, in the advertising context. And then Google may, in some cases, even exceed your budget, like in the short term. So on a monthly basis, it keeps the budget, but for individual days, it might go over or under as it sees fit. So in fact, you're not even in complete control of the budget anymore, even though you can set, or it is required that you set a budget for each campaign. So more and more is taken of decision making is taken over by algorithms, and this happens for Google, and it also happens in platforms like Meta. Meta has, for example, Advantage Plus, and those are feed-based forms, as I mentioned. So the content comes from feed, and this again is affecting a lot how we work, right? Because now if we talk about feeds, we are collaborating with IT. So we have something like this. This is an example of feed. So you have a title, product title. It's describing the name of the product. It has a link to the image of the product. It has some attributes regarding color, size, and manufacturer. So these are the things that are running the ads nowadays. When you see these shopping ads, Google shopping ads, they are all based on feeds, and those feeds are configured by IT. And us marketers, we give maybe some requirements to IT, but if we give requirements, then we need to understand what are the requirements. So we need to go into Google developer web page. We need to go into their technical documentation and look at the requirements. And often we just send a link to the IT, but there might be some fields that we want to be included. There are some decisions still involved. So optionality in terms of which fields to include and how to put the information. So there might be some choices that affect how the ad is shown and what the information is provided, and therefore we as marketers, we need to understand the feed requirements, and we need to understand how they translate then into the actual ads, right? But this is again very different from advertising previously, because this is much more technical. We need to go into developer documentation, and it's a certain type of skill to know how to read developer documentation and how to understand what is a requirement, first of all, that it's a clear description of what is wanted from a system. And marketers generally are very bad at writing requirements, very bad at understanding how to ask specific things from developers, because there's no training. But what I'm saying is that that's a skill that's sort of already needed nowadays when running these ads, because a lot of it is based on automation, and automation is based on these product feeds that we need to have. So then there are tools that help in this process and make sort of it easier for us to run the ads or customize the feeds. So here's an example that we've been using in one company is called Channable. So here you can basically have IT develop one feed, and then you connect it to Channable, and you can vary that feed by putting different conditions. So for example, you could filter only the products that are less than 50 euro if you want like a budget feed version. So you don't need IT for that. You can just choose the price field and set a rule, and then this tool will create a new endpoint, which means a URL, because the URL will be the one that you provide to Google Ads, or in fact through Google Ads you cannot directly put. You need to use a connection to Google Merchant Center, which is where you will be inserting the product feed, and then Merchant Center will be linked to Google Ads, and in Google Ads you can then select the feed that you want to run for a specific campaign. So see, again, it's a little bit technical. It's not super difficult. It's just that you have different systems that are connected to one another. You have information. So your role is to figure out, okay, what type of feeds do we want? What are consistent with different, consumer behavior? And your job would be to translate that to this type of, for example, in this case, how to customize the feed to target different type of buyers, like, I don't know, budget buyers and then luxury buyers based on price. But you could use any attribute that is part of the feed. But again, if you don't understand the feed, you don't understand the attribute, or you don't understand the customer, then you're not able to produce value in this type of environment. So the ad types, as I mentioned, we have text ads, so also called search ads, display ads, which are the banner ads, something like this. We have video ads running on YouTube and TikTok mostly, also in Facebook, of course, and Instagram. And yeah, this Google is doing a really good job at customizing your ads. So basically something like you see here with multiple versions. This is based on like you providing one picture and then the text to Google, and it will create you these variations automatically. You don't need to, you can still create sort of a whole banner ad and then upload it to Google, but that's sort of a vanishing way of doing things, and these responsive display ads are the more common thing. So you will just provide again the building blocks, and then Google resizes them and combines them in a way that sort of again is supporting your campaign goal, and it does it through experimentation. So it's showing a subset or different versions to a subset of people, and then it's checking the performance, and very aggressively, if it sees something is working, it starts to emphasize that version more over the others. So yeah, it's kind of this idea with machine learning, or one type of machine learning that's running in the background, automatic testing. So instead of us testing, different versions of the ad, the system is doing it automatically, and that's much more faster and efficient than if we were running the tests ourselves. We can still run tests, A/B tests there, for example, but then you need to figure out really why just to test two different banners nowadays doesn't make sense, because platform handles it much better. So you need to have a good reason why you want to run a test, what you want to learn from that, and how you want to sort of deploy that information then in action. And with the different ad types, the banner ads are sort of, you could say, useless. So GDN and other, well, not completely useless, but they're among the most useless formats. And because you have campaign modes, I mentioned, you have discovery campaigns, you also have demand gen campaigns that are supposedly generating demand. So those are based on showing this display and banner ads. And actually, I just had a couple of weeks ago a discussion with an account manager that's run them multiple times in multiple countries. And I asked, have you ever seen demand campaign generate positive returns? And she said, no, never. So that's why I said, okay, that's why I never run them, because I've seen the same thing since 2009 when I started. Display banners didn't work back then, and now in 2024 they still don't work. like they don't generate positive return on investment if you use them alone. And the reason is very simple. They're disruptive, they're obtrusive form of advertising. So here's an example heat map of how attention. Last week we discussed about the Google's golden triangle and the F pattern, but in the context of advertising, you can see this in this example. Nobody's looking at the ads because they're interested in the content. They came to the website to read the content, not to watch the ads, right? It makes sense. So this was the reason as that we discussed last time with the IADA and IDA models, that this is trying to grab the attention. This is the IDA model, clearly not working. But if a person is typing Chanel in search engine, it's the IADA model. They already have the interest. Then we should capture their attention with the Chanel ads, right? And that's why if you do it so, then you get the best performance because it's consistent with people's behavior. So if you go against people's behavior and the tasks that they're trying to complete, you will lose because people have the option of where they put their attention. They have the option of ignoring you, and that's what they do in the case of display banners. So this effect was actually found in the same year as the paper about Google PageRank was published, 1998. So this is, I would say, as much impactful as PageRank was for search engines, then this paper or this idea of banner blindness is equally important for online advertising, because once you understand this, you understand that you have to be consistent with user behavior and consumer behavior. If you are, then you will get good results because you are supporting the person in their tasks instead of trying to forcefully capture their attention. So don't spend much money on display ads. You can try them, but if you notice the same thing that I have noticed, then yeah, don't magically assume that they will all of a sudden start to work, because in theory they're against the theory of how things should work. Social ads work better because people are actively browsing and exploring, right? So if you're in TikTok or Facebook, you are scrolling the feed, you're not interested in particular news article, like in this case, you are visiting a website, you want to read the news article, but there you're sort of, okay, what is the cool thing, right? You're sort of curious about your friends and about things happening in the world. So then ad pops up, and then you're more receptive to something new. You don't have such a strong predefined task that excludes ads from sort of affecting you. So that's why social ads generally work better than display ads, but the best performance is with search ads because there the compatibility with the user task is the best. And then we have this idea of this ad type performance sort of decreasing over time. And here's an interesting, this was the first banner ad from 1994. So how many years is that? 30 years, I guess. Long time ago. So it had 44% CTR, click-through rate. But nowadays, if you run display ads, your click-through rate is maybe 0.01%. So it's multiple orders of magnitude lower. So this effect generally tends to happen. So I'm mentioning this because when a new ad type comes up, and then there are a lot of case studies, some by Meta, some by Google, some by just sort of industry bloggers, and they might show really good results, but you should be aware that there's a lot to do with novelty effect. So something new comes, initially it performs very well, but over time there's this idea of regression to mean. So the performance decreases over time. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go after the new things, right? Because initially there's a window of opportunity. So if you have this 44 percent click-through rate. Yeah, you should definitely run these banner ads till you run out of money, right? Because they're performing really well. But it just happens that there's no permanent remedy. So after a while, this performance will drop, and you need to all the time find something novel to get an edge in this kind of environment. And yeah, these search ads have a specific structure. So I already mentioned search ads is still among the dominant ad forms. So nowadays we have the shopping ads and we have video ads and so on. But these text ads, the search ads are still the ones that bring most of the revenue of Google. And that's billions and billions of dollars every year. So the idea here is that they have now a structure which is kind of complex. You have those, I mentioned multiple headlines, and then I mentioned multiple descriptions. You have extensions on this ad, call out extension, which can include a short description of your benefit, like free delivery, for example, or 12-month validity or something like that, like a short benefit, a USP, unique sales proposition that you have. And then you have also other extensions like structured snippets and site links that might show below the ad. So these are links directly going to your some specific landing page on your website. So there are a lot of it's again very technical, right? Because there are a lot of components. It's like engineering type of work you need to figure out. You're just not writing one ad and thinking that's it. You need to think about all these extensions, these site links. The site links can vary by ad group. They can vary by campaign. So what site links should I show here? What descriptions, what headlines? And yeah, there's a lot of this kind of complexity here, but that's why, people are not good at handling this type of complexity. So that's why the paradigm is going into this idea that you just write a bunch of headlines, write a bunch of descriptions, throw in a bunch of site links, and let the platform handle it. Because frankly, you, me, or nobody like systematically can optimize this. It would be very time consuming and very difficult for us. People are just bored with numbers. So this idea, I will talk about it later, but this idea of just throwing in a bunch of stuff and then letting the platform select the best ones and their best combinations automatically sort of taking over. But we still need to kind of be aware of what the ad looks like and understand the limitations. So for example, here, headline cannot have an exclamation mark. It cannot have any special symbols. This is the very elementary mistake when I work with some marketers and they are asked to write copy. They put the exclamation mark every freaking place. The exclamation mark, and then they put do this, do that. The copy is terrible usually, and well, I've run this search ad so long, so I know already to delete the exclamation marks, because if you put it there, the ad will get rejected. So Google and Facebook and all these platforms, they have policies, and if you break the policy, it might not let you post the ad in the first place, or then it lets you post, but later it flags it and automatically puts it into hold. You need to fix the things then to make it show. And the same thing with character limits that people struggle with. The headline has a certain number of characters fit. Then you have long headline version as well. It has longer. Description has more, something like 90 characters, and all these site link description one, they have certain character limits. So you need to learn those, and well, generally you need to learn concise writing, so writing in a brief manner. and be very, I don't know, informative. Of course, we have different rhetorical devices that we use and different persuasion tactics, but often in search and informativeness is good. So here's an example of one ad, but you can find many others online. And then let's talk about metrics. So a lot of, as you saw from the first slide, so it's very kind of like this dashboard with a lot of metrics, a lot of information. So optimization is means that we advertisers make decisions, and then we discussed previously that some of the decisions are sort of taken away by the platform because of automation, but other decisions we still can make. And one of the key decision, or let's say driving factor in running online ads is selecting the metric to optimize for. So this is also very much consistent with the idea that it's us people who select the campaign goal, right? So if goal is visibility, then we want cheap impressions. If the goal is traffic, we want cheap clicks. If the goal is to maximize sales, then we want people that maximize the conversion value. So those are all real metrics that can be tracked by the platform. And they are also good because they're consistent also with the machine learning paradigm. In machine learning, you always select one target metric to optimize for. So this is consistent with both our campaign, the human factor, which is selecting a campaign goal, such as visibility, sales, traffic, and it's consistent with how machine learning works. Give me one metric, quantitative metric, give me a bunch of futures, and the algorithm will try to find how those futures are mapped with that metric in order to maximize it. So this is speaking to the technical innovation, but it is interesting to see sort of the evolution in the metrics. So when I started with online advertising, CPA was the dominant, so cost per acquisition, and everyone was talking about how much it costs to get a conversion, right? What's the price of a sale, because if we are selling something and it costs 100 euro, and our margin is 40%, so 40 euro remains for us. So then, like in the best scenario, our break even is if we had no other costs, which of course makes no sense. We have a bunch of other costs, but for the sake of simplicity, assume there's no other costs. So our maximum CPA is 40 euros that we can pay for a conversion. And this is a gross simplification because, as I mentioned, a company has a bunch of other costs than the click costs that should of course also be factored in. So you can mitigate that, or you can sort of somehow approximate those by lowering. Then you should think that, okay, our margin is 40%, but in fact we have a bunch of other costs. So maybe for advertising, our real target or maximum CPA is like 20 euro. So then we still have another 20 euro for the other costs that we have, and we still would be profitable. Of course, we need to consider the profitability as well. So that would just be the maximum. So if we go above that, then we are running ads on a loss, right? But if we're below that, then we at least generate some profit from the ads. So the lower CPA we get, the better. And the good thing is that we can track this through cross and between the platforms. So we can get CPA from Google, CPA from Facebook, because they each have their own pixel. Again, a technical term, pixel. So as advertisers, we need to know about pixels, installing conversion tracking, so that we can get these numbers, first of all. And yeah, IT does it most frequently, but IT sometimes misconfigures things and they don't necessarily understand the business requirements. So again, it used to be that we just dump them a script that, okay, here's a script for conversion tracking. It's a few lines of code, just put it on the website. That is no longer the case. Now we need to, the analytics configurations are more complex and they cannot be done anymore like that. So you need to now understand more about the measurement principles, and you need to make some kind of judgment calls there as well. Yeah, so this used to be the case, CPA, cost per action, but there's also the idea that this is missing another factor that's important, which is the lifetime value, right? Because here we consider only the first conversion of the person, but actually the margin from one sale is not hopefully the only revenue that we get from this particular customer, but they would at least hope, we are hoping that they make repeated purchases, and therefore the margin over the lifetime is bigger. So that is on the other hand, giving us in theory a higher CPA maximum to bid for. But those are usually not quantified very efficiently by marketers. So this was used quite simplistically. Around 2017, maybe even a bit before, the new king metric emerged, which was the ROAS, return on ad spend. So as I mentioned, it is best understood as in describing how much return you get for every euro that you invest in a campaign. So this took over this metric, and then everyone started looking at the ROAS, and that became like a dominant, and it is still to date a dominant. So what you have, if you run Facebook or Meta ads or Google ads or whatever ads, they will ask you to report ROAS. If you are in e-commerce, if you are generating some revenue through those campaigns, then ROAS will be required from you, like you need to report it. So what is challenging here is that we can have duplicate conversions in a way that there's a conversion taking place in that person has sort of been in our touch point in Facebook and in our touch point in Google. So what now happens is that both platforms report the sale as their own. They don't exchange any information, right? So Google reports that there are now 100 euro sale and Facebook reports 100 euro sale. But so now you're thinking you have 200 euros, but in fact you just had 100 euro, right? So this is a huge problem. And in theory, you can use an independent measurement platform like Google Analytics, because Google Analytics tracks both of them. But unfortunately, Google Analytics tracks very poorly all other platforms except Google. So their conversions are underreported categorically in Google Analytics. So it gives sort of like a structured advantage always to Google Ads. And that's problematic because we sort of know that platforms like Facebook, TikTok, YouTube are doing better. They're having some value, but we cannot observe that value directly from Google Analytics. This is a very standard case in the industry. So to tackle that, it's only this year and perhaps last year, very recently, this idea of incrementality. So this is based on sort of I'm not sure well established, but let's say traditional econometric modeling, which is about indirect observation. So we have some inputs like sales, cost that we put into different platforms, and then we have the sales development of sales. So you can consider those as time series data. So Google Ads cost for this day, Facebook ads cost for this day, TikTok ads cost for this day, and then sales for that day. So now over many days we have variation in both in the spending and in the actual sales. So these methods are trying to find a connection between these independent variables, which are the budgets or the costs from the platforms, and the observed true variable, which is the sales. So this is also known as marketing mix modeling, and it's a very relevant topic because of a lot of analytics issues that we have. I will talk more about this in the analytics lecture, but if you are into analytics, then and you think of thesis topic, go for MMM, because there will be a need for experts in this field, and it's already sort of it's growing and it's gaining legitimacy in online advertising. So the idea that we cannot trust the numbers reported by platforms themselves because of this duplication problem, among other problems, and then we cannot trust platforms like Google Ads because they are not able to capture all the interactions properly, and they have some structural problems. So we know our actual cost and we know our actual sales. So those are more reliable numbers, and then we can use this statistical modeling to find which channels drive traffic and try to optimize our spending levels across different channels. So that's becoming a reality, and there are a lot of tools now out there that are making it easier for marketers to do this statistical modeling or econometric modeling complex. But there are now software as a service tools that even integrate to your ad platforms and retrieve that data and make this analysis easier. It's also notable that Google and Meta are investing in this technology a lot, and some of the platforms are benefiting from their open source contributions in this field. So interesting here is that customer lifetime value has never been a top metric, but customer lifetime value should be one of the key metrics, right, that we want to optimize. I mean, it's self-evident. We want customers that are buying the most over the lifetime. This metric is not used actively because it's not available as default metric. That's the simple reason. See how much we are dominated by the platforms. A top metric we don't use, that we know from theory is a very important metric. We don't use it because it's not in Google Analytics or Google Ads. So we just ignore one of the primary metrics. You can program it, but most marketers don't understand, and they're scared of technology, so they will not do this kind of touch this kind of programming things. But there are other companies, gaming companies, and these mobile operators that use this metric actively, and they calculate it from their own databases. But for standard cases in e-commerce, this metric is typically ignored. Then we can have other metrics that are important, especially CPR, cost per revenue. And this is sort of not coming from the platforms. This is ourselves, we need to calculate this. So again, we know how much we spend on advertising in different platforms. We can calculate that all together. And we also know for a given month how much we sell. So we can just calculate how much we are spending relative to our earnings, right? So, and then we can have target for that, for example, 9%. So the online ad spending should not exceed 9% in a given month. And this also relates to budgeting. So roughly speaking, there are two ways of budget your online ads campaigns. You can be given a lump sum, which happened to me in my first case. So again, they said something like, Joni, here is 200,000 euro, figure out how to spend it on online ads, make a plan, and then So they give you a lump sum, sorry, that will be the fixed So they give you a lump sum, and that will be for the year. You cannot go over it, and you should spend all of it, or otherwise it's like, unspent money. This flexible is a smarter way, and that's also how now a lot of the organizations are working. So as long as you are uh, spending a certain number and you're not exceeding this, basically the idea is that if your ads are working and you're driving more sales, then just increase the budget. Don't stay at the 200,000, go to 300,000, 400,000. As long as it's profitable, your budget can be whatever it is. You can spend as much as you want. And in e-commerce, this also makes sense because in e-commerce, you get the money in the sales, you get the money immediately from the sales, but then the next month you need to pay Google ads. So, right, you're getting the money. If you're growing a lot, you have that money in your bank account and you can afford to pay the ads bill. So, like, from cash flow perspective, it also makes sense. All right, then we have attribution. This is a very key concept. Attribution means how do we allocate when we have, for example, a 100 euro sale taking place? How do we allocate like the value of that sale to individual channels or campaigns? Because we need to say that, okay, I ran this ad and it generated the sale. But this is a very arbitrary field. It's a very subjective in a way. I'll explain why. It's because of this idea. First of all, let's say you had multiple touch points happening. Someone saw the ad on Google, but then they saw it also in YouTube, and then they clicked also your ad on Facebook. So now you have this 100 euro sale happening. So how do you allocate? You know that there are these three interactions with your ads. So how do you allocate that sale now to the three campaigns? So there is no like absolutely correct way of doing it. So typical way, which was the default way in many platforms, was this last click. So the value of the sale goes to Facebook because Facebook was the last touch point. This is also easiest to measure because we can see technically that the person is coming from Facebook and then they're buying. So we don't see that history. We don't see Google ads. And we cannot see the YouTube. We just observe in our analytics system the last click. So we actually cannot do anything else except the last click attribution. So now the channels that were earlier in the conversion journey are ignored. They don't have any value. It looks they had zero effect. If we had knowledge about the whole chain, then we could say the first click is most important because that's how people got to know us. So we're going to attribute the value for Google. Then, of course, there's naturally this linear that, okay, we have three touch points. Every one gets credited 33.3 euros of the sale. So that's sort of obvious one, and you could say that's the best because it's the fair. But again, you can say that last click is the one where they made decisions, so it's more valuable. First click is more important because that's how they got to know us. You see the point? So who is to make this judgment? How much a certain interaction affected? So it's arbitrary. There could also be a model, or there was a model based on time decay. So as we go farther or closer to the actual conversion event, we adjust the revenue attributed to a given channel. However, these were the classic ones, let's say 10 years ago, that were part of the attribution theory. Now, currently, it's practically only this data-driven attribution, especially when it comes to Google. So all the campaigns, all the accounts run data-driven attribution. Now, huge problem. We don't know exactly how it works. Nobody knows. Maybe Google's engineers might know. But here with these classic ones, we knew at least how it sort of does. With data attribution, it uses some bunch of estimation, bunch of formula there, but we don't know what those are. We don't know how they exactly work. We can have these odd results where a campaign generated 23.1 conversions. And what is that 23.1? But how can it even be? So it's producing there a number that's not the actual number, but it's sort of like an approximation. And this is problematic, of course, because, well, we know there is some true value. We cannot have 2.5 sales. We had 3 sales or 2 sales. There is always in kind of statistical estimation or approximation, there is some error, but Google reports no error margins or error rates. It just reports this one number, and it's using it to drive all the decisions related to the campaigns. There's also a challenge, which is events. What is the event? And we started from the idea that only click-based conversions should be calculated. So if a person clicks the ad, that has a value because of the banner blindness, right? If a person sees the ad, doesn't have any value because they don't click on it. So this was the idea, but this idea is all the time being eroded. First of all, in Google, in Meta, you have view-based conversions, I believe, as a default as well. So it's enough that person sees that ad for 1 millisecond. It flashes on their screen, and now we are attributing some value to the ad. Is it right or wrong? Yeah, so again, we might have an opinion as marketers, but it doesn't matter our opinion if the platform is using data-driven attribution and they are using view-based events as part of attributing the conversions. Then it might say that, okay, YouTube has this conversion, even though a person went to somewhere else while the ad was running or something like this. So we are losing transparency and explainability of attribution. That's also one of the reasons why this incrementality and marketing mix modeling is taking over, because there's certain loss of trust in how ad platforms are attributing because of this lack of transparency. So we would rather have our own statistical modeling and based on the actual numbers that we know, which is how much we put in money and how much we earn. These numbers they are not estimates, they're exact numbers that we can see from our e-commerce systems and in the ad platforms, because we know how much we pay them, how much their bill is, and we know how much money is coming to our bank account. So we know these numbers, they're not estimates. Yeah, and then you have these funny effects coming from this. For example, in Google Ads conversion metrics, you might see that your ROAS is changing. It's improving over time. So you look at your campaign today, and then you, for a period like 1 month, let's say now August, and then I'm looking at it the next week, I'm looking at the same period, August. But now my conversion metrics are better. My ROAS is higher. What the hell is happening? So it's recomputing the numbers. It's now including more conversions that it's tracing back to the ads running back then. So it's kind of interesting fact that if you look at the ROAS for August and you look at it different days, you get a different number. And yeah, this relates to the look back window, how much far you are going into the past. So this is a big in marketing theory or in advertising theory, we have this idea of delayed effects, uh, and sort of the idea is that you show a person ad today, but they don't immediately take action. The idea brews in their mind and then they make the decision later on. It's called the carryover effect. So eventually, so then if you're measuring the ads performance at the same day, you get zero. But that's not, again, true. It's not corresponding to reality because the effect will happen in the future. So that's why in this kind of campaign measurement, we have this look back window, and the duration of that look back window is another arbitrary thing. Should it be 7 days, 14 days, 30 days? From ad platforms perspective, the longer is better, right? Because it captures the most conversions and it makes their numbers look better. From advertisers' point of view, maybe shorter is better. So in Facebook ads, we have greater flexibility in terms of determining the look back window and also the click versus view event, at least currently. So there we can make this kind of calls that we want to just focus on the clicks and we want to have as short as possible look back window. So that's usually if we are trying to aggressively find that is this really providing us with value. On the other hand, we have sort of this moral hazard. If we are agency and our client is pushing us, then we can look at the same campaign and we can put, oh, let's enable the view conversions and let's maximize the look back window, and boom, the campaign performance just doubled because now it's capturing more conversions. It's attributing more value to our campaigns, so our numbers look better. So then our clients, okay, you did a good job. So we have this kind of decisions also here. And sometimes as marketers, we can tilt the numbers in our favor by changing the attribution. We can still show the screenshot and it shows those numbers are real, right? So the good performance is there, it's reported by Facebook. We just forgot to tell that it's reported when we use this attribution. We want to be completely ethical. We can say that if we use this version of attribution, we get this number reported. Then if we use another alternative, it will be this. So we can report both, and then we can discuss with client sort of why they are different. I think this would be the most ethical way of doing it, especially with clients that don't really understand how this conversion tracking works. So then we also have this couple of ideas when we comparing performance. If you have a campaign that's running now and you want to know, is it doing well? How do you determine that? So you can compare, roughly speaking, in two different ways. You can compare the previous period. So this is what I often do when I do weekly based optimization. So in these ad platforms, they have this easy function where you can compare, and then you enable the comparison and you choose previous period. And if you have chosen 7 days period as your reporting window, then you will see also the change from the earlier 7 days. So this shows you how much you have gained or lost during the past week compared to the previous week. So it shows kind of a short-term performance, and if you did something, if it had an impact in the past week. So that's, I like to use that when I do like sort of this weekly optimization. This can also, of course, be affected by seasonality. So now is high season week and last week was low season week. So it's not, I cannot necessarily say that my actions completely drove the improvement or vice versa. And for that elimination of seasonality, we use often this year over year. So instead of choosing the comparison period to be the previous period, we choose it the same period in last year. So it's comparing the same week from 2023. And now we could see how well we are doing compared to the exact same sort of week from last year. So here we can see more like long-term, let's say, improvements or losses. So both of these, let's say, lenses comparisons should be done when doing online ads optimization. But there's an effect, or let's say a thing that is done, in my opinion, very wrongly by many organizations when it comes to online ads. It's the panic. It's the panicking. I can call it panicking. So they would have questions like, okay, we have 10% change or 5% change, and what caused this change? So this question is sort of very difficult, if not impossible, to answer, and it has often very little to do with anything that we did with the ads. It's most of the optimizations we do are relatively minor, and all the time we cannot be changing the whole account around. Most of the tests and changes you do, if you have already a well-functioning account, will actually be negative. So most A/B tests would be failures. Most changes or experiments are failures. They are not successes. If you're running an experiment and you're expecting an improvement, you are most likely wrong. Again, if your sort of account is already reasonably optimized. So like, don't believe the survivorship bias in all this idea that, oh yeah, every time we do an A/B test, we see an improvement. That's false. In most cases, you see a negative change. So that's also why you run these tests, and it's really hard to find something that improves something by testing, in fact. And often in this short time window, like, in the week of what happened, it's random fluctuation, macro factors, consumer behavior, the weather, whatever. These kind of factors we have no control over. So this is like problematic, this questioning, because it can result into marketers giving an answer. Like, I've seen this a lot. So they just give some reason that they did something and that was the cause of the change. For sure, no. In most cases, no, it's not. It's not a reason, but you ask a question, you get an answer. It's sort of like with ChatGPT. So it sort of works the same with people. They start to rationalize things. It must have been because of that. It must have been because of this. And then it's speculation. And that's why it's problematic. So I rather, if you are running an ads team, or they're reporting to you, whether it's in-house team or an agency, ask them what they did, not why is this now 10% change now. It's like, will be very, you will just get the nonsense answers if you go there. Ask, what did you do, guys, and explain me, why did you do why do you think it works? So I'm kind of a data oriented guy. So it might seem funny that I say that, sort of ignore the data, but that's a lot. That's a lot. Sort of that philosophy is driving a lot of my things when I do digital marketing. That I aim to do the right things. So, and what is the right thing? It's based on partly intuition, experience, partly also numbers, right? But I'm thinking, okay, this will work because it should, there's a core principle behind it, and there's no plausible reason why it should not, like, why it should work the other way around. So this is more powerful way. So actually, yeah, just focusing on the big picture and focusing on the actions and why we do what we do, and instead of trying to look at the numbers and why we had this small change. It's different if we have, like, 50% change, then we need to ask, okay, why? But if you have this random fluctuation, 10% here and there, it's generally in at least in small and medium-sized businesses, it's a random fluctuation. All right, so let's talk about copywriting. I mentioned already that I think the generative AI will write better copy than most people. And it's the case. It's the case, unfortunately. But here are some based on my experience of writing ads and also writing academic and whatever texts, which is also sort of form of persuasion. It's even more challenging than online ads to get a reviewer accept your writing. It's much more challenging than copywriting. But nonetheless, sort of similar principles sometimes apply. Concise, short, don't overpromise. So again, if you make this sort of clickbaiting, this will usually bite you because the platforms will look at what happened after the click as well. So they look at the landing page relevance, for example. And of course, it will be contrary to the user experience. So here applies the same principle as with SEO, the UFO principle, so user-friendly optimization. So, just correctly represent what you are offering. That's very important. Clear USB, so it's standard thing. Social advertising image is much more important than text. So this happens in, for example, Instagram, Facebook advertising. What you choose as image matters in general more than text. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. You have particularly interesting story or customer testimonial that speaks to the nature of social platform and what people are there for, to hear interesting stories, then in that case text might work really well. But in standard case, image is very important because people are quickly scrolling and that visual will either catch their attention or not. And yeah, showing the product. So this product-based, feed-based marketing is very effective. And it's also, yeah, so the words matter less there, or let's say relatively less. Of course, they matter because you still need to have the call to action to the link and give some information for people to actually make the decision to click. We did a study with TikTok ads, and there's a huge death valley in the attention, in the drop of video. So basically, in the first second, you need to capture a person's interest. If you don't, then they will drop. It's like 99% of people will just scroll forward. So it's an enormous death valley. But if you can get them to start watching, then they stick around for longer period, and there will be another drop toward the end of the video, but until then it's usually lower the churn rate during the watch time of the video. Testimonials work, so the word of mouth effect is important in advertising. It's like people believe in other people's experiences more than in companies' statements. So if you can incorporate that in your ads, whether in video, text, or image, then that's likely to be effective because again, people like, and reviews are same logic why reviews are a huge driver for decisions to purchase or visit the place. I would recommend crafting a blacklist. I have done this with the teams I've led in digital marketing. Blacklist of words. Here are words I don't want to see, and it helps because most marketers they don't know how to write copy. I mean, which is funny, but I can say this because I've seen dozens and dozens of them, and it's the same boring text. Do this, do that, and full of exclamation marks and full of adjectives. Lovely thing, and this and that. It's so plain. It's so boring. It's so uninteresting. It will never produce any kind of competitive advantage. and it's totally breaking against the, let's say, rules and principles of copywriting that we know, that have been sort of published in copywriting books by Claude Hopkins, by David Ogilvy, and so on. So like it has never worked, so it's not going to start working all of a sudden. But people don't know. That's maybe because that's the type of ads they see. So they see poor ads, so they think they should write like that. I don't know what the reason is. But one way to counter that is to create the blacklist of words, like a lot of the common adjectives that people use, and then include those in, and superlatives and all this. Those will not, in the online environment especially, or you need to capture attention and really provide information. People don't care if you're just very stereotypical about your writing. So I mentioned David Ogilvy, Claude Hopkins. Scientific advertising can be downloaded for free. I recommend that as actually as a must read, especially for all the DMA students. It's almost 100 years old book, and it speaks of conversions and this testing. I know I mention it a lot, but I really recommend you to read it. You can read it in 1 day, 2 days. It's not a long book, and it's very interesting. So it explains about copywriting. And other books are from David Ogilvy, who's a famous advertiser and thought leader. So those can teach you much better copywriting than I can, but I've seen a lot of problems, so I can talk about the problems. So ChatGPT is good enough, and we did an experiment with our intern, who actually, well, the background is this: we did ad testing with him, and we did a competition for Christmas where I myself, then another senior colleague with multiple years of experience in online advertising, and Anssi competed. So we had a proper A/B test running in Google Ads, and Anssi won the copywriting competition. So he had the highest CTR. But then we pitted Anssi against ChatGPT. So I had some prompts done, and ChatGPT wrote some text ads, and again we are now running it against Anssi, wrote some new ads, and we put them to competition, and ChatGPT won. So statistically better performance compared to Anssi. The thing is here that then afterwards we gave Anssi access to the ads, so we showed the ads that ChatGPT did, and then we said, okay, now improve on this. So because of course now we can give Anssi information what worked, and then Anssi improved or made new versions of this. Then we run the ads again. This time it's like inconclusive. On some metrics Anssi was better, but not on all of them. So this is quite interesting. I think that this is the thing here is that average copywriters are average, and those are the ones who will lose the most easily. And in Ansi's case, he was not like average, he was among the good ones, really. I've seen a handful of good sort of copywriters, and Ansi is definitely one of them. Another one was this Ilkka, that he was nothing to do with marketing, but somehow he interned with us, and he was from something like forestry, or I don't remember exactly what, but he had no exposure to marketing or copywriting, which was great because he's he did it differently. He didn't jump into this bandwagon of using superlatives and adjectives and exclamation marks, but he wrote like he would write to another person, and that was very, very strong and compelling. But yeah, so I don't think it's like with ChatGPT, it's writing average copy text because it's trained with average copy text that is produced by average ad copywriters. So this is the average effect. So that's why it will be powerful when we use it for copywriting, because most advertisers are just average. So ChatGPT can easily match that type of performance. If you want to beat ChatGPT, you can, but then you need to put the effort into it and you need to rise above the average level. If you don't do that, then you just as well can let ChatGPT write your copywriting. It will do it as good or better as you. But if you want to do copywriting, you need to really study it. And that's the way you can beat the machine. If you really understand what are the principles of good copy, if you practice it a lot, you read the classics and you apply that together with your understanding of your target audience, then you will beat. But otherwise, if you just think that you will graduate from marketing and you do some copywriting, you will not be able to outperform a machine on that job. All right, then a couple of ideas about how to view campaigns. So we have this portfolio thinking. So you can have a lot of campaigns nowadays. There's no upper limit if you run a Facebook ad account or a Google account. You can have from one campaign to hundreds of campaigns. It's usually maybe these big still are efficient, even efficient and big accounts can still include maybe around 10 campaigns or something like that. I think going much above that is not purposeful, because then you are just sort of breaking, you're fragmenting the optimization too much. So online ads campaigns have certain benefits of scale when it comes to producing data for the algorithm, and also there's the cognitive cost. So if you have dozens and dozens of campaigns, it will be hard for you to manage and optimize them, because there's this rule of magic number 7 plus or minus 2, which is, I think, from the 1950s by Miller, which means that we cannot remember, we can remember from 5 to 7 things at the same time, but not more than that. So a little bit similar applies to campaign management. If you have too many campaigns, it's hard to keep them in mind all the time, and it's hard to optimize them. But anyway, so any number of campaign you have, we can think of them in terms of two overall objectives, which is demand generation and demand capture. And this is also idea with also channels, not necessarily campaigns. So channel, you have to think when you're building sort of this portfolio, your portfolio consists of different channels. So you have some kind of budget. Then you need to figure out what are the channels we run. Google ads, okay, that's usually always a given. But then, okay, Meta ads, maybe TikTok ads, maybe. Then you need to split the budgets between them, and you need to start doing things. So what helps you here can be that you have this idea that Google is capturing the demand because people are searching already for the product. In Meta and TikTok, we are trying to generate demand because people are not looking for us, but they also don't know about us. So we are trying to generate that demand by showing them our offering and explaining why we are a good choice. So that's the division here, that you are simultaneously trying to generate some demand and also capture it. That's why you have different campaigns that have different roles. And for example, you could drive a lot more attention in TikTok with the same budget as you could in Google. So I actually haven't run TikTok ads in the past year, but when last time I did, the visibility prices are just really, really affordable, much cheaper than Instagram, for example. So it would make sense from that standpoint that it's a good demand generation campaign, relatively speaking, channel, relatively speaking. So these are generally the goals that we have, and this is also why focusing on the return on ad spend, or this performance marketing perspective completely, is sort of like a red herring, or let's say a false goal. It is because if we would do nothing than retargeting and brand campaigns, we can have a very high return on ad spend. So we are just targeting the people who are searching for us using our keyword, our brand keyword, and then we're doing retargeting campaigns that target people who have visited our website. I guarantee you we can have a phenomenal return on ad spend. So it looks like our campaigns or our online ads are doing really, really well, right? But in actually, it's not really optimally configured because it's forgetting about this demand generation. For growth, we need to drive new people. We cannot just sort of leech and exploit the existing interest. If we want to grow the company, we need to get new customers. So we need to get this new customer acquisition going. So that's the idea, that there is always some kind of loss, because we cannot be 100% optimal, or we can, but then the trade-off or the opportunity cost there is that we are foregoing a lot of growth because we are not attempting to reach any new people. So this will be always a balance between capturing the existing demand versus generating new demand. On the other hand, if we just put all our money and the campaign budgets on the new traffic acquisition and demand generation, our ROAS generally looks poor. And then they think, oh, you are doing a very poor job because your ROAS is very low, right? So we need to strategically somehow mix the demand capture with demand generation. And then, yeah, I mentioned the retargeting. So you have all experienced this, and I mentioned the example of visiting, for example, one site and then going into, well, retargeting, strictly speaking, is I visit one site and I can see that site's ads as I visit other sites on the web. So this is retargeting. So it can be, and then dynamic retargeting is that the ad platform is sort of selecting the products to show for the people, and it can be the same products they visited, or it can try to recommend new products based on the products that the person visited. So in retargeting, the dynamic retargeting, the ad is adjusted automatically by the platform. But in standard retargeting or static retargeting, we would ourselves create a fixed ad and with a certain specific message. Almost all targeting nowadays is dynamic. Again, speaking to the fact that ad platforms are taking much more control over the message and the specific products that are being shown, and human has little control over it. And these retargeting campaigns would be often nowadays incorporated within the PMAX campaign, which I mentioned. The PMAX campaign is like a big octopus with a lot of these, oh, I don't know the word for that, tentacles. Yeah, a lot of tentacles going to different websites, and the PMAX is trying to take over. It's trying to, so it's running also retargeting, and it's running search ads, and it's running YouTube ads, and it's the pinnacle of this idea of us throwing a bunch of material, a bunch of signals about our audience and our visitors, and then letting the big machine turn the wheel and make this magical decision. And PMAX is the best performing typically campaign format at the moment when we look at ROAS metrics. So that's why it's winning a lot of ground. but at the cost of us making decisions whether we think it's a good or not. That depends. Um, and yeah, the retargeting, there are factors that might negatively affect user experience. So you might want to somehow gauge it, although in cases like PMAX, it's again doing automatically. But yeah, you shouldn't use too much money on these retargeting campaigns, is also my opinion. And then mm, one thing is exclusion. So if you have a lot of conversions, you should have an exclusion audience that never show ads to the people that have converted, which is one of the mistakes that is made in retargeting by not having exclusion audience. So these audiences are actually can be sort of segmented through Google Analytics, and Google Analytics is connected to Google Ads. So you will have conversion tracking there. So people who are purchased, you give that audience a name, like purchasers. So then in the ads UI, you can have target audiences and excluded audiences. So you just choose purchasers as exclusion there, and then the ads are not showing to this audience anymore. The optimization, how does it work? So what is optimization in practice? There's no one way of doing it. All professionals, online advertising professionals have their own optimization routines. If you go into this industry or do this job, you will also develop your own routine by studying how other people do it and then sort of developing your own version of it. Here's one example. So open Google Ads account, go to campaign view, select the past 7 days, look at the metrics of the campaigns, sort by highest spend, get an idea of where most of the money has gone, because you might have a lot of campaigns. So if your campaign is spending only 50 euro, why would you spend a lot of time on that? Just focus on the one that's spending 2,000 euros, because that's where you're most likely the low-hanging fruits, or actually any type of fruits or any type of impact will be on improving that campaign's performance. So that's what I like to do, focusing on the campaigns that have the biggest impact. Look at the ROAS, and then you have a ROAS target. So for example, 500% or whatever is the target, you should calculate that, and it varies by business. So you need to know what is the ROAS target for this account. And again, sort from highest to lowest and look at the campaigns that have high budget or high spend and relatively low ROAS. So you want to increase that ROAS. If you can do something, you can, but if you are somehow overspending for the whole account, sometimes you need to pause individual campaigns. Sometimes you need to increase. If one campaign has a high ROAS and you can increase its budget, which is not always the case because it might not scale up due to lack of search volume, for example. But if it can, then you would shift the budget to that type of campaign and take it away from the worst performing ones. So this kind of example shows you what is optimization on data. Looking a lot of the numbers, and it's a lot more to do with numbers and clicking the fields and changing from 50 to 100, and then might change some settings there in the individual campaigns. And it's quite rarely working with ads. So often, so sometimes I update the ads, sure, but relatively speaking, a lot less is to do with ads than, because I have, of course, initially you need to write, but once you have certain good ads, they kind of perform okay, or the CTR is kind of good. So then they work. Ad copywriting is something that's never perfect. You can always improve, sure. But if your CTR is already at, let's say, 11 or something like so, 11 out of 100 who see that click, it's kind of high already. So maybe you can make big efforts, you can push it to 13 or something like that. But remember, there's always the risk. You do something and actually the CTR goes to 9. So it's not automatically an improvement. And oftentimes it's the other way around. So there's like can be a cost for this, not only time, but also performance wise. So yeah, and there are different levels. So inside the campaign settings, there are a lot of things. Then you can look at the individual keywords, change landing pages, pause, re-enable campaigns, change priority, and so on. So this is to do with the fact that the platforms are really technical, and you need to understand the intricacies. The best way to learn this is by doing, and second best way is to look at, for example, Google's instructions on how to run campaigns, so help centers. Okay. And yes, and then how frequently should you optimize? Are you doing daily, weekly, or more seldom optimization? I think you can overdo this for many smaller accounts and also mid-size accounts even that are really still sort of viable e-commerce businesses. Often once in a week, I would say, kind of suffices. You have a cost of doing too frequent optimization because there's a cycle of collecting data as well. So if you every day do stuff, it can very quickly go into kind of the changes you do are kind of canceling each other. So so you might allocate some time to see if the changes have an effect. I personally prefer this weekly optimization cycle that you do work on the campaign sort of once a week intensively, and you make a lot of changes, and then you observe how they affected, and you look at the results after a week, and then you do another set of changes. What you what you shouldn't do is kind of this set and forget. Set and forget means that you just configure the campaigns and you let them run. It's actually surprisingly possible nowadays in Google Ads or Facebook Ads because of the automation doing so much of the decision making in the background, that you can run campaigns with the set and forget mentality. But it's like you still need to rationalize that you are needed at least, but you are needed because it's still not doing completely everything. For example, budget uh, allocations, it doesn't automatically change the budget allocations between the campaigns. It also doesn't stop and enable campaigns unless if you have specific rules. But even then, you as the human need to make those rules. Such decisions it doesn't make yet. It makes more like inside the campaign decisions. And also from the bigger picture, you need to be active with multiple channels. So again, these competing platforms like TikTok, Google, Facebook, they don't exchange information. So you're the only one who knows how they work in sort of this mix or portfolio of channels that you have. So you're the one looking at the CPAs or ROAS values or clicks in different channels, and then deciding the allocation of budget between them. So there's no standard tool for that, and there's no standard automation for that. So that's still like human decision making. And also, yeah, inside the platforms there are certain ways decisions that you still need human for. And then there is this point also, the flexibility of like, the demand capture. So the spend itself will fluctuate sort of according to the natural demand. in search campaigns, right? Because if there is no search volume, your campaign will accumulate no clicks and cost. But if the searches start to emerge, then you are now, given that your campaign has budget and it's competitive in bidding, you start to increase its spend. So even if you didn't do anything, you can still, you can keep your Christmas gift campaign on all year long. But in other months, except maybe November and December, that campaign is spending like zero. But it's on there. If someone is looking for Christmas gift in July, they will likely see your ad. But since most people don't, so you would have zero or close to zero clicks for that campaign, and then it will naturally start working when you have Christmas. So sometimes you don't need to pause and re-enable these campaigns that are seasonal, because the platform handles it sort of through this natural mechanism. Then I want to talk about this challenge that we have, which is the silo. So as advertisers, we often focus on the pre-click things that we cannot influence in the ad platform. And that means that there's something happening after the click, okay? So this is often outside our hands. So we drive the traffic and we want them to be quality visitors, right, who are likely to buy. But then their website, if we don't have control over it as marketers, as advertisers, right? It's the client's website, they don't want to change. This is a problem. Then because of course people are not getting the experience they wanted, they will not convert, and our numbers will look bad, but it's not sort of our fault. So this is to say that we have a very sort of dire need as advertisers to interact with the landing pages. And it's not a separate thing that we just focus on the ads and we don't care about the landing. Or if you think like that, then you're not at least doing it in an optimal way. You should be interested also in improving the landing pages and making sure they're matching with the ads. And there, if you keep these two things siloed and separate entities, it's artificial, because for the people clicking the ads, it's just one experience. So for them, it's not that somebody else is handling the website, so it's okay, it's not good. They should have a unified experience, and therefore it's like requires that you make certain promises in your ads. You choose certain landing pages that they sort of match the ads, and therefore you can get a consistent experience and better outcomes. So what I'm saying is that as advertiser, we are not only preoccupied by running the ads in the platform, but we also care about the conversion optimization, which is a topic we'll talk later in this course about. In general, there are a couple of principles to this end, which is that you want to mirror. So if you have important product categories, you want them to be represented in your ad campaign. So this mirroring principle was a very basic principle. You have women's shoes category, so you should have a women's shoe campaign or ad group, depending on how you structure your ads. So this was the idea, that we want to basically replicate our website structure in our Google Ads. Nowadays, it's a little bit being eradicated by the fact that we are using a lot of these automated campaigns like DSA and PMAX that are sort of doing that replication kind of implicitly in the background. But that used to be the core principle of structuring an ad account in Google Ads. And also deep linking, the idea that all the ads shouldn't link just on the homepage, but you should go as specific as possible. So you go directly to the product. The closer you can go to the product is better, right? Because you want to minimize the number of clicks a person needs to do to buy or to make a decision. So putting all the traffic to the homepage is not optimal for that. Then we have this automation versus manual decision. So I have some kind of tips on this, and basically, yeah, you can read the tips. A lot of the decision is now made automatically by Google, but what you should know as an advertiser is that Google have, of course, a vested interest in, like, it wants to get the most money out of you, and its interests do not perfectly align with you. So sometimes the recommendations, for example, Google's recommendation to increase a budget is not business savvy. So every time a Google recommends something, you shouldn't blindly accept it. So this is not only my advice, but the professional online advertisers kind of agree with this. So you should be very careful about accepting Google's recommendations without thinking first. Sometimes they are good, many times they can be good, but other times they are not optimal for you. You should do the thinking and not blindly accept Google's recommendations. I have real examples of, for example, accepting automated bidding in brand campaign. The cost goes 3 times higher, revenue increases by 0%. So Google benefited, we didn't, going back to manual bidding. So these kind of examples exist out there. And then we have this idea of creatives theory, and this might be the future of online advertising. And we are now at the stage, we used to be at the stage of creativity, okay? And then now we are at the tinkering stage, right? You saw all those things that I talked about changing the configurations, changing beats, changing this, making me do a lot of clicking there. So this tinkering might actually lose its value as more and more stuff is being automated. A few more things that they automate, and it's kind of uh, eliminating our value of making those decisions as humans relative to an algorithm. So if this happens, then what will be our benefit? Like, this will be interesting. We are going into kind of a perfect market where we cannot get any advantage by any means that we do, because the machine will calculate that your price should be this, your number of conversions should be that, given all else, and in given all the other advertisers, and giving the searchers motivation. This is how it should go. So they make all the decisions automatically. But one thing in that setting can be the creatives. So we might go back to in this idea that creatives matter, and that if we have the most compelling offering and we tell about it in the most interesting way, then that's our competitive advantage, not the tinkering part. Because basically, if we produce a good thing and then we throw it to the platform is already finding, it will find the audience for it, right? It can make all the decisions from forward, but it cannot make that great thing, that great offering that we have. And if we do that, then the platform will basically take care of the rest. So this is already happening with a lot of influencers, for example, in social media. They are not optimizers, they are not technical experts. They produce interesting content and then they get millions of views. So basically, platform is taking care of the visibility. So the same idea might generalize itself to online advertising as well. All right, so that is it. So thank you for attending, and have a good week, guys. See you on Friday.